Welcome to Shattered Ties, where trust is broken, loyalties are tested, and hidden betrayals come to light. Here, we uncover the darkest sides of family, friendship, and love, stories of deception, greed, revenge, and the quiet pursuit of justice. So sit back, listen closely, and step into a world where every shattered bond leaves a scar. Grief is not always loud. Sometimes it settles. It becomes part of the architecture of a life, not the acute kind, not the kind that stops you in the middle of a grocery store or on a Tuesday morning drive to work, just the permanent kind. The kind that is always there, like a room in the house you never open, always aware of, never quite gone. Jack Sullivan had carried that room for 23 years. He had learned to carry it the way you learn to carry anything long enough, not without weight, but without showing the weight. He had built things since. An auto repair shop that became 2, then 4, then a small chain of 8 across the state. He had married and divorced with a sadness that was specific and not unrelated to the room. He had made friends, and maintained them, and gone through the decades of his 40s, with the particular forward motion of a man who has decided that forward is the only honest direction. But the room was always there. The door had never opened. He had named her. This was the thing that had stayed with him, that would not be set down regardless of how long he carried it. They had named her before she arrived. Emma had wanted something classic. He had wanted something that sounded like beginning. They had settled on Claire, in the specific collaborative way of two 19-year-olds who are terrified and in love, and have decided that a name is a form of commitment, a way of making the future concrete by giving it a sound. Claire. He had said the name in the hospital once, very quietly, to a nurse who had told him he could have a moment. He had stood in a hallway and said his daughter's name out loud, and then walked out of the hospital into the September air and sat in his car and understood, for the first time, what it meant to lose something that had never had time to become a memory. 23 years. He had been 42 years old for 3 weeks when the knock came. It was a Saturday afternoon in October. The specific kind of October afternoon that Southern Ohio produces, gold-lit and slightly cool. The kind of day that is its own argument for being outside. He had been in his garage, which was not a professional garage but his personal one. A large detached structure behind the house, where he kept the '69 Camaro he had been restoring for 4 years with the specific patience of someone who understood that some projects were not about the destination. He heard the knock at the front door from the garage. He set down his wrench. He walked through the yard and around to the front of the house, wiping his hands on a cloth. He opened the door. The young woman standing on his porch looked familiar, not because he had met her before, because every morning for 23 years, in the specific half-waking state before full consciousness arrived, he had imagined what his daughter might look like if she had survived. He stood in his doorway. He looked at the young woman. She was 23, he would learn this later, but he could see it, the specific quality of that age, the way it sits between something finished and something not yet begun. She had dark hair. She had the particular set of her jaw that he had seen in photographs of himself at that age, in the specific geometry of a face that is doing something with bone structure. He recognized the way you recognize a song before the words begin. She was looking at him with an expression he could not read immediately, not nervous exactly, but aware of the weight of the moment she was in, carrying it consciously, the way someone carries something fragile. She had a folder in her hands. "Mr. Sullivan," she said. His voice, when it came, was not entirely steady. "Yes," he said. She looked at him. "My name is Claire Bennett," she said. "I think you might be my father." He did not invite her in immediately. He stood in the doorway for a moment that was probably 5 seconds, and felt like considerably longer. And he looked at her, and she looked at him, and the October afternoon was entirely indifferent to what was happening in this doorway on this porch on this street. Then he stepped back. "Come in," he said. She came in. She sat at his kitchen table, the table where he ate dinner alone most nights, the table that had the specific utilitarian quality of furniture that is not decorative because there is nobody to decorate for, and she set the folder on it and looked at him with the careful patience of someone who has rehearsed this moment many times and is now in the unrehearsable reality of it. He made coffee. He made it because he needed something to do with his hands, and because the ritual of it, the specific sequence of filling and measuring and waiting, gave him 4 minutes to assemble himself into something functional. He set 2 cups on the table. He sat down. He looked at her. "You said you think," he said, "not that you know." She opened the folder. "I have a DNA test," she said. "I submitted to a genealogy database 6 months ago. Your name came up as a potential paternal match." She paused. The probability was high enough that I started looking. I found a lot. She laid a paper on the table. This is the test result. He looked at it. The numbers, the percentages, the clinical language of genetic certainty. He looked at the number at the bottom. He set the paper down. You also have this, he said. It was not a question. She placed a birth certificate on the table. He looked at it. His name was not on it. The father line was blank, not absent, not listed as unknown, just blank, which was its own specific thing, the blank that is produced when someone is removed rather than simply absent. He looked at the mother's name. Emma Carter. He had not seen that name in writing in 23 years. He looked at the date. September 14th, 23 years ago. He put his hand flat on the table. She told me you died, he said. His voice was very quiet. A few hours after you were born, the nurses said it was a cardiac defect. They said it was one of those things that, he stopped. He looked at the birth certificate. They said you were gone before they could. He stopped again. He looked at the young woman, sitting across his kitchen table. He looked at her face. He thought about the name he had said in a hospital hallway 23 years ago, very quietly, to a nurse, the one time he had allowed himself to say it out loud. Claire, he said. She looked at him. Her expression was doing something, not breaking, not performing, but moving. Something in it was reorganizing around what she was seeing in his face. I don't think you abandoned me, she said. The sentence arrived in the kitchen. He sat with it. He looked at the folder in front of her, the thickness of it, the number of papers visible at the edges, the documentation of someone who had done research, who had followed trails, who had arrived at his door not with anger, but with a folder full of evidence, and a sentence that suggested she had already done the work of understanding the shape of what had happened. What do you know? He said. Enough to know that something isn't right, she said. Enough to know that the story I was told that my biological parents gave me up by choice doesn't fit the documents. She paused. I was told you and my mother decided an adoption was best, that you both agreed, that it was a decision made together. She looked at him. But your name isn't on the birth certificate. It was never on any document. And in the genealogy database, your family information is there, clearly, but there's no record of any voluntary relinquishment signed by you. He was looking at the table. I never signed anything, he said. I know, she said. I never, he stopped. He looked up. I was told she died. I was told my daughter died in the hospital and I spent 23 years. He stopped again. The kitchen was very quiet. Claire looked at him with the specific expression of someone who has been carrying a version of grief for most of their life, and is now in the presence of someone carrying the other half of it. I know, she said again, very quietly. He stood up. He needed to stand up. He needed to be vertical, to move, to let the body do something while the mind worked through what was being asked of it. He walked to the window. He looked at the backyard, the garage, the Camaro visible through the open door, the ordinary October yard of an ordinary life. He thought about 23 years. He thought about the room in the house that he never opened. He thought about a nurse and a hallway, and a name said quietly. He turned around. Stay, he said. Please, I have things in the house. Documents from then, I need to, he stopped, looked at her. I need a little time. She looked at him. I have time, she said. He kept things. This was something he had not known about himself until Emma disappeared, and his daughter died, and he found, in the years following, that he could not throw away the small accumulation of documents and objects that were all that remained of that period. He had not been sentimental about much in his life, but he was sentimental about this, in the specific way of someone who has so little that every piece of it is load-bearing. He went to the room at the back of the house. Not the room he never opened, which was a metaphor and not a literal door, but the actual room he used for storage, with the boxes on the shelves and the filing cabinet his mother had given him when he moved into this house, and which he had filled with the documents of his adult life, organized with the practical precision of a man who had learned early that paperwork mattered. The box from that time was on the bottom shelf. He had not opened it in years. He brought it to the kitchen table. He opened it. The smell of old paper, the specific quality of documents that have been closed in a box for a long time, acquiring the particular character of unexamined things. He found the hospital paperwork near the bottom. His admission forms. He had been a patient too, briefly, treated for the shock of it. The specific medical response to a 19-year-old who had been told his daughter had died and had needed to be seen by someone before they sent him home. He found the discharge papers. He found, beneath those, the document he had been given, a death certificate. He had looked at it once, 23 years ago, and had put it in this box and had not looked at it again, because looking at it had served no purpose that he could identify, and because looking at it had produced a specific physical response he had not wanted to repeat. He laid it on the table. He looked at it now with different eyes, with the eyes of a man who had a young woman sitting across from him who should not exist according to this document, and who very clearly did exist, who was 23 years old and alive, and had dark hair and his jawline, and was sitting at his kitchen table drinking the coffee he had made. He read it carefully. He read the date, September 14th. He read the time of death, 4:47 a.m. He read the cause, congenital cardiac defect, acute cardiopulmonary failure. He read the attending physician's name. He read it again. He looked at Claire. "Do you have the birth certificate with you?" he said. "The time of birth." She found it in the folder and handed it across. He looked at the time of birth, 4:52 a.m. He looked at the death certificate. Time of death, 4:47 a.m. He sat with those two times. He sat with the arithmetic of it. The specific, impossible arithmetic of a death that had been recorded 5 minutes before the birth. He set both documents on the table side by side. He pointed. Claire leaned forward. She looked. He watched her see it. "The death certificate," he said, "is timed 5 minutes before the birth certificate." She looked at both documents. She looked at him. "Someone made a mistake," he said. "Or someone was careless. Or someone was working fast and under pressure and wasn't careful enough." He looked at the two times. Someone recorded a death that hadn't happened yet. The kitchen was completely silent. Outside, the October afternoon continued, the gold light, the slight cool, the indifferent beauty of a day that had no awareness of what was happening inside this house. He looked at the documents. He thought about the word careless. He thought about the alternative. He thought about who had been in that hospital. He thought about his parents. He thought about his mother's voice on the phone that morning. The specific quality of it, the managed grief of a woman who had called him before the doctors did, who had arrived at the hospital already knowing, who had been, in retrospect, too composed for a woman whose son was losing a child. He thought about his father, who had handled the paperwork. His father, who had always handled the paperwork. He picked up his phone. He looked at Claire. "I need to make some calls," he said. His voice had changed, not louder, not harder, but different in texture. The voice of a man who has identified a direction and is now in motion. "I need you to stay, and I need to show you some things, and I need to ask you some questions." He paused. "But first I need you to know that whatever I find, whatever this turns out to be, I did not abandon you. I want you to know that before we go any further." Claire looked at him. The expression on her face was the most complicated thing he had ever seen. 23 years of a story being rewritten in real time. The specific look of someone receiving a truth that rearranges something fundamental. She nodded. "I know," she said. She said it differently than the first two times. This time it was not a hypothesis. This time it was the beginning of a belief. He picked up his phone and began to find out what had been done to his daughter, and to him, and to Emma Carter, and to 23 years of 3 people's lives. He was going to find out all of it. He was going to know. He found Emma in 3 days. Not because she was hiding. She had not been hiding for 23 years. Or if she had been hiding, it was the kind of hiding that looks like ordinary life, the kind that involves a name unchanged, and an address findable through the normal mechanisms, and a life lived in the open in a city 3 hours north. He found her through the specific efficiency of a man who had built a small business empire through the consistent application of focused effort, and who had now directed that effort at a single problem. LinkedIn, first, she was a graphic designer, which fit with something he remembered about her at 19, a quality of visual attention she had brought to everything around her. She was at a firm in Columbus. Her profile photograph was small, professional, and showed a woman of 41 who looked like the woman of 19 he had known, in the way that people look like their younger selves when you know what to look for. He sat with the photograph for a long time. He thought about what he was going to say. He had not spoken to Emma Carter in 23 years. Their last conversation had been in a hospital waiting room, both of them 19, both of them receiving the same information from different sources. His parents had told him, her mother had told her, the news delivered in the specific managed way of adults who had decided what 2 teenagers needed to hear and had delivered it. He had looked at Emma across a waiting room and had seen in her face the same devastation he was feeling, and had understood, in that specific moment of shared grief, that they had both lost something irreplaceable. He had tried to reach her after. The calls had gone unanswered. He had gone to her mother's house and been told, by Emma's mother at the door, that Emma needed time and space, and that Jack was not helping. He had accepted this because grief made the path of least resistance feel like the kindest path, and because he was 19 and had not yet learned that the path of least resistance is often someone else's path, built for someone else's purposes. He drove to Columbus on a Tuesday morning. He had not called ahead. He had thought about calling and decided against it, because he needed to see her face when he said what he had to say, and a telephone call did not produce faces. The design firm was in a converted building in the short north, the specific neighborhood of Columbus that had been something else before it was what it was now, full of the particular energy of places that have been gentrified into creative industry. He parked. He sat in the car. He thought about Claire, back at his house. She had come back the previous day with more documents, and they had sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours going through what she had assembled. He thought about the birth certificate and the death certificate and the 5-minute impossibility between them. He thought about what he was about to do. He got out of the car. He went inside. The receptionist told him Emma was in a meeting. He said he would wait. He waited in the lobby for 22 minutes, with the patience of a man who had learned, over 42 years, that some things could not be rushed into being ready faster than they were. Emma came out of the meeting at 11:47. She came down the hallway with the focused forward energy of someone between tasks, looking at her phone, and she looked up when the receptionist said her name and pointed toward the lobby, and she looked across the lobby and saw him. She stopped. He stood up. She looked at him across the lobby, with the expression of someone who has just seen something that cannot be happening, and is managing the gap between that certainty and the reality of their eyes. He said, "Emma." She said nothing. She was looking at him with the specific intensity of someone reading a face they have not seen in 23 years, for everything it currently contains. He said, "I need to talk to you. Something has happened and I need you to hear it from me." She looked at him. "Is it about her?" she said. The receptionist was watching with the politely contained interest of someone whose job occasionally produced unexpected human situations. "Can we go somewhere?" he said. There was a coffee shop half a block away. They walked there without talking, the specific silence of two people who have too much to say and have not yet found the beginning of it. They ordered. They sat at a table in the back corner, away from the other tables, in the instinctive self-placement of people who need privacy. Emma looked at him. She had the controlled quality of someone who has spent years managing emotions that had no adequate outlet, who had built the containment into the structure of herself. She was 41, and she looked like a woman who had been, for most of her adult life, carrying something she had no language for. "Tell me," she said. He told her. He told her about the knock at the door on Saturday, about Claire standing on his porch with a folder, about the DNA test and the birth certificate and the death certificate and the 5 minutes between them. He told her everything in the sequence it had happened, carefully, watching her face as he went. Her face did things. He watched it do them. The first thing it did was the specific expression of someone hearing information that their body is receiving as true before their mind has authorized the reception, the involuntary physical response to something real arriving. Then it did the thing of someone reorganizing, quickly, the architecture of a belief they have held for a long time. Then it did something more complicated and more personal, something that he recognized as the specific expression of a person who has been grieving something and is now being told the shape of the grief was wrong. When he finished, she was very still. "She's alive," she said. "She's alive," he said. "She's 23 years old and she's been looking for us, and she found me on Saturday, and she's Emma. She's extraordinary. She has your eyes." Emma put her hand over her mouth. He gave her time. He sat across from her and gave her the time the moment required, which was not short, which was the specific time of a woman who had given birth at 19 and been told the baby was gone, and had spent 23 years with that fact as the most foundational grief of her adult life. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but she was not breaking. She was holding it, the way she had apparently learned to hold things. "What are you saying happened?" she said. Her voice was steady, the steadiness of effort. "I think someone arranged it," he said. "I think someone arranged the adoption and arranged what we were told and arranged for us to believe what we believed." He paused. The death certificate was filed before she was born, 5 minutes before. Someone was careless or under pressure or working quickly, and the timestamps don't match. Emma was looking at the table. "Someone had to have been in that hospital," she said. "Yes, someone with access. You need access to arrange something like that. You need paperwork, you need hospital staff, you need a notary or a..." She stopped. She looked up. Your parents were there. He said nothing. She looked at him. Your parents were there, she said again. Not a question this time, a realization arriving. Yes, he said. And mine weren't, she said. Her voice had changed, something underneath the steadiness, something that had been there for 23 years and was now finding the correct container for itself. My mother didn't come until the day after. My father wasn't, he was out of state. It was just me and you and your parents in that hospital. Yes, he said. She looked at the table. She looked at her coffee. She looked at something that was not in the room. I was told, she said slowly, that you didn't want to be involved. That when the baby was born you said, she stopped. She was working through something, the specific reconstruction of a person who is examining a memory with new information. They said you told your parents you wanted to sign away any parental rights, that you weren't ready, that you had plans and a baby didn't fit. She looked at him. Your mother told me. She came to me, to my room, while I was still in the hospital, and she told me that you had said it, and that the best thing for everyone was an adoption. She paused. She said you had already started the process. He sat with that. He thought about his mother, coming to Emma's room. He thought about the specific efficiency of that. His mother, who was efficient above all things, going to Emma's room in the hours after the birth, and delivering the version of events she had constructed, to a 19-year-old girl who was alone and exhausted, and had just given birth and whose boyfriend was not there. Was inexplicably not there, which had been arranged to look like a choice. Where was I, he said, when she came to you? Emma looked at him. They said you'd gone home, she said, that you needed space. He thought about what had been done to keep him from Emma's room. He thought about his father suggesting he get some air. His mother saying rest was the most important thing. The specific, gentle management of a 19-year-old who trusted his parents because he had no reason not to. He had gone for a walk. He had walked around the hospital parking lot for 40 minutes trying to find a way to breathe. And when he came back, his mother had told him Emma needed time and didn't want to see anyone right now. And the nurses had confirmed that she was resting and not taking visitors. He had stood in a hallway and said his daughter's name. His mother had been in Emma's room. She never told you I wasn't there voluntarily, he said. She told you I had left. Yes, Emma said. And when you tried to reach me after, you didn't answer. She looked at him. I called 4 times. You never called back. And then your mother called me a week later and said that you were moving on and that reaching out was only going to make things harder for everyone. He looked at her. He thought about 4 phone calls he had never received. He thought about his phone during that week, how often he had left it at home, how often he had been, in the specific way of a grieving 19-year-old, not functional enough to manage his own logistics, relying on his parents to handle the things that needed handling. He thought about who had been handling his phone. He looked at Emma. I never got those calls, he said. She looked at him for a long time. He watched her put it together. Not the whole picture would take time, would take the documents and the investigation and the former nurse who had agreed to talk, but the outline of it, the shape. She did all of it, Emma said. He said nothing. Your mother did all of it. He looked at the table. I think so, he said. I think yes. Emma picked up her coffee. She set it down without drinking. She looked at the window. I wrote you a letter, she said. He looked up. About a week after they told me she was gone and you weren't coming back, I wrote you a letter, she paused. I never sent it. I wrote it and I addressed it and I held it for 2 weeks and then I couldn't send it. I didn't understand why I couldn't. I just couldn't make myself put it in a box. She paused. I kept it. He looked at her. I kept everything, she said. I don't know why, I'm not a sentimental person, but I kept everything from that time. The hospital paperwork, the discharge documents, the photographs. She paused. I kept the letter. Can I see it? He said. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment. I'll get it, she said. She brought it to his house 3 days later. She and Claire met for the first time in his kitchen. The 3 of them at the table where Jack had been eating alone for years, where Claire had sat with her folder on a Saturday in October. He watched them look at each other. There was a specific quality to it, mother and daughter meeting without the context of having been mother and daughter, the recognition running underneath the unfamiliarity, the body knowing things the situation had not yet confirmed. Emma had wept quietly in the car before coming in. She told him later. Claire had stood in front of the mirror for 20 minutes. She told him later. They sat. They were careful with each other. They were also, within an hour, not careful at all, talking in the direct way of people who recognize something in each other that transcends circumstance. Emma had brought the letter. She gave it to Jack. He opened it at the table, with both of them present, because it seemed important that all three of them be in the room when whatever it contained entered the world. The handwriting was 19-year-old handwriting, larger, less controlled than what Emma's hand produced now, the specific penmanship of someone who is writing in urgency and grief. Jack asterisk, I don't understand what happened. I don't understand why you left and why you won't call back, and I don't understand how you can just, she was ours. She was ours and she was here, and then she wasn't, and I needed you to be here with me and you weren't. I'm not angry. I want to be angry because angry is easier, but I'm not. I keep thinking about her name. We gave her a name and now she's gone. And the name is just a word that goes nowhere. I don't think you're a bad person. I don't believe that. Whatever happened, whatever you decided, I don't think you're a bad person. I just needed you to know that I named her when they were gone. When they all left the room for a minute, I said her name out loud because someone had to, and you weren't there, and she deserved to have someone say it. I said Claire. She deserved to have her name said. Emma. He finished reading. He set the letter down. He looked at Emma. She was looking at the table. I said it in the hallway, he said. I said her name in the hallway when the nurse gave me a minute. Emma looked up. At the same time maybe, he said, or close to it. She looked at him. She looked at Claire. Claire, who had been reading the letter over Jack's shoulder, was very still. You both said it, Claire said. She said it very quietly. It was not a question. He spent 2 weeks on the documents. He was systematic. He had been systematic his entire professional life. The auto repair chain had been built on the specific discipline of a man who understood that systems were what separated businesses that lasted from businesses that didn't, and he brought that discipline to this. He made lists. He built timelines. He requested records. The hospital records first. He had a right to his own medical records from that time, as a patient. His lawyer, a woman named Catherine, who had handled the business's legal work for 8 years, and who had, when he called and explained the situation, said, "Tell me everything," and then said, "I'm clearing my schedule," had filed the requests. The records arrived in partial form, some documents accessible, some restricted, some flagged as having been transferred to a records management system in 2009, whose current status was unclear. What arrived was sufficient. He had been admitted as a patient at 5:12 a.m. His daughter had been born, according to the birth certificate, at 4:52 a.m. 20 minutes had passed between Claire's birth and Jack's admission as a patient. He thought about those 20 minutes. He thought about a 19-year-old in a waiting room being managed by his parents, being told things, being moved from one position to another while decisions were made in rooms he was not in. He found the adoption agency through Claire. She had spent 6 months on this before she found him, and her research was thorough in the specific way of someone who had grown up knowing a gap existed in her story and had been working toward filling it since she was old enough to know how. She had the name of the agency, a private adoption firm in Cincinnati that had closed in 2011. She had the attorney's name, obtained through state bar records. She had a copy of the adoption finalization paperwork, obtained through the state adoption registry that Ohio had opened in 2014. The attorney's name on the adoption paperwork was Gerald Marsh. Gerald Marsh had been his father's attorney for 20 years. He put that document on the table. He looked at it. He looked at the name. He thought about his father's relationship with Gerald Marsh. The golf outings, the business dinners, the referrals his father had made to the firm over years, the specific texture of a relationship between two men who had been doing favors for each other across decades. He thought about the kind of favor this was. Catherine, when he showed her the document, was quiet for a moment. "This is significant," she said. "The same attorney who had a long-standing relationship with your parents handling a private adoption in the same week your daughter was born. That's not coincidence. That's conspiracy. Can we prove it?" he said. "We can build a significant case," she said. "Between the timestamp discrepancy on the death certificate, the adoption attorney connection, the phone records that Claire has showing contact between your mother and the attorney in the weeks before the birth." She paused. "Claire has phone records. She has her adoptive parents' statement," he said. "They received a call from an attorney the week of Claire's birth. They thought it was routine. They didn't know they've been fully cooperative, Catherine. They didn't know anything was wrong. They were told it was a voluntary adoption by a young couple who wasn't ready." Catherine was making notes. "One more thing," he said. "There was a nurse. On the floor that night, Claire tracked down the nursing staff roster through a hospital employees association. There was a night nurse named Patricia Oakes who was on the maternity ward that September. She retired in 2015. She lives in Dayton. Catherine looked at him. Has anyone spoken to her? She said. Not yet, he said. I wanted to talk to you first. He paused. I wanted to know what I was allowed to ask her. Catherine looked at her notes. You're allowed to ask her everything, she said. She's a private citizen. She was a witness to events in a hospital 23 years ago. There's no legal restriction on having a conversation. She paused. Whether she'll talk is a different question. He looked at the documents on his kitchen table. He looked at the photograph of Claire that she had left with him, a recent one, taken by her adoptive mother, the two of them at a birthday dinner, Claire laughing at something off camera, with the specific unguarded quality of someone who is happy and knows it. He looked at her face in the photograph. He thought about a name said in a hallway. He thought about a 19-year-old girl saying the same name alone in a room, believing the person she had said it with had chosen to be somewhere else. He thought about Patricia Oakes in Dayton. He picked up his phone. He found the number Catherine had helped him locate. He dialed. It rang 3 times. A woman answered. Mrs. Oakes, he said. My name is Jack Sullivan. I think you were working at Ohio Valley Hospital in September 23 years ago. He paused. I need to talk to you about something that happened on the maternity ward that night. I think you might know what I'm trying to find out. A long silence. Long enough that he thought she might hang up. Then, how did you find me? It took some time, he said. Another silence. I've been wondering, she said, for 23 years if someone was going to call. He sat down. I'll tell you what I know, she said. God help me, I'll tell you what I know. Patricia Oakes lived in a small house in Dayton's east side. He drove there on a Saturday morning, 2 days after the phone call, because she had said she would talk but not over the phone. She had said it in the specific way of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and understands that the weight of it requires a physical space to be set down in. He had respected that. He had agreed to come. Catherine had offered to accompany him. He had said no. He needed this conversation to be what it was, not a legal proceeding, not a deposition, not the gathering of evidence in the formal sense. Just 2 people in a room. A man who had lost something and a woman who had been present when it was taken. He drove the 2 hours in the specific focused silence of a man who has been moving towards something for 2 weeks and is now in the final approach. The house was modest and well kept, the house of a retired person who had found the right relationship with her space, everything maintained without excess. A small garden in the front, mostly put to bed for winter. A cat visible in the window. He knocked. She answered. Patricia Oakes was 71. He had done the arithmetic from what Claire had found, and she looked it in the way that some people look their age, which is to say she looked like a person who had lived fully and was not apologizing for the evidence of it. She had the bearing of someone who had spent decades in a profession that required both precision and the management of other people's worst moments, and that bearing had not left her in retirement. She looked at him with the specific directness of someone who has decided to see something through. Jack Sullivan, she said. Mrs. Oakes, he said. She stepped back. He came in. She made tea. He had not asked for tea, and she had not offered it. She had simply moved to the kitchen and made it with the efficiency of someone performing a ritual that bought the room time to settle. He sat in the living room in a chair she had indicated, and he looked at the cat who had relocated from the window to the arm of the couch and was looking at him with the impartial assessment of cats. She came back with 2 cups. She sat across from him. She looked at him for a moment. How is she? She said. He looked at her. You know about her, he said. I knew she'd been found, Patricia said, or that you'd found each other. Someone in the genealogy world, it's a small world, the people who do that research. I heard something about a match that was significant. She paused. I hoped it was her. He thought about 23 years of Patricia Oakes hoping. She's remarkable, he said. Patricia looked at her tea. I'm glad, she said. I've thought about her a great deal. A pause. I've thought about all of you a great deal. He looked at her. Tell me, he said. She set her cup down. She folded her hands. She looked at the middle distance in the way of someone entering a memory that has been revisited many times, whose details are not blurred by time but sharpened by it, preserved in the specific amber of guilt and unresolved obligation. I was the night nurse on the maternity ward, she said. I had been for 6 years at that point. I knew the floor, I knew the staff, I knew the patterns of how things worked. She paused. At 4:52 in the morning on September 14th, a baby girl was delivered. Healthy, full term. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Apgar scores were normal. There was nothing wrong with her. He sat very still. The mother was exhausted, Patricia said. She had been laboring for a long time. The father was not in the room. I understood he had been removed to the waiting area, which was not unusual. Some fathers weren't permitted in the room during delivery at that facility. The maternal grandmother was there, I think, briefly. She paused. The paternal grandparents were also in the hospital. I had seen them in the waiting area. He thought about his parents, in the waiting area. He thought about what they had been doing while he walked in the parking lot. About 20 minutes after the delivery, Patricia said, a woman came to the nursing station. I recognized her as the paternal grandmother. I had seen her in the waiting area. She spoke to my charge nurse. I was nearby. I heard some of what was said. She paused. She said there had been a family decision made regarding the infant. She said she used the word arrangement, that an arrangement had been made, and that she needed to speak with the attending physician. Jack's jaw was tight. He kept his hands still on his knees. The attending physician was Dr. Hartwell, Patricia said. He was a good doctor. I want to say that because what happened was not, I don't believe he was corrupt. I believe he was given a version of a situation that was not complete. She paused. I believe he was told that both parents had agreed to a relinquishment, that the paperwork was already in process through an attorney, and that what was needed from the hospital was discretion. Meaning what? Jack said. Meaning the death certificate, she said. Meaning the specific documentation that would close out the birth record in a way that created no loose ends. She looked at her hands. Someone, I don't know if it was your mother directly or through an intermediary, someone provided a document to Dr. Hartwell and asked him to sign it. He signed it, Jack said. He signed it, she said. I don't believe he understood the full. I don't believe he knew that the father hadn't consented. I believe he was told both parents had agreed and that the paperwork was a formality. She paused. I want to be honest with you. I can't tell you with certainty what Dr. Hartwell understood. He died in 2016. I can only tell you what I observed. What did you observe? Jack said. Patricia looked at him. I observed the baby being transferred, she said. A private transport. Someone came, a woman I didn't recognize, not hospital staff, and the infant was prepared for transfer. The official record would show a death. The actual record was, she stopped. She looked at the window. I watched them take her, she said. The baby was alive and healthy, and I watched them take her out of that hospital. The room was very quiet. The cat was still looking at him, from the arm of the couch. Jack breathed in. He breathed out. Why didn't you say something? He said. He asked it without accusation. He had decided, before he came, that he was not going to sit in her living room and be the instrument of her guilt. She had carried it for 23 years. It was already there. She looked at him. I was 28 years old, she said. I had a job I needed. I had a 2-year-old at home. She paused. And I told myself the things people tell themselves, that the baby was going to a family, that she would be cared for, that I told myself the parents had agreed. I didn't know you were in a parking lot. I didn't know you didn't know. She paused. By the time I understood fully what had happened, time had passed, and I am not proud of the calculation I made. I want you to know that. I have not been proud of it for 23 years. Jack looked at her. He thought about what it meant to carry a thing like that for 23 years. He thought about the specific weight of it, not the same weight he had carried, but a weight nonetheless. The weight of a witness who had not spoken, who had made the calculation and lived with it and had been waiting. She had said on the phone for someone to call. I need a statement, he said. My attorney needs for what comes next. I need a formal statement. I'll give one, she said immediately. Whatever is needed, she paused. I should have given one 23 years ago. He looked at her. He thought about what to say. He thought about grace, the specific complicated question of what grace was available in a situation like this, what it looked like, what it required. You waited for someone to call, he said, and you answered when I did. He paused. That's not nothing. She looked at him. Her eyes were wet. It's not enough, she said. No, he said. But it's something. He stayed for another hour. She told him everything, the names she remembered, the specific sequence of events, the details that had stayed with her in the particular way that witnessed things stay. He recorded it on his phone, with her consent. He took notes on a legal pad he had brought, in the specific shorthand of someone building a record. When he left, she walked him to the door. She stood in the doorway as he went down the path. Mr. Sullivan, she said. He turned. I hope, she stopped. I hope the time you have with her is worth more than the time you didn't. He looked at her. It already is, he said. He drove back to Columbus. He drove through the Ohio afternoon and thought about everything Patricia Oakes had said and thought about what it meant and what it changed and what it confirmed. He thought about his mother. He had been moving toward this conversation for 2 weeks. He was ready now. His parents lived in the same house they had lived in for 35 years. the large colonial in Dublin that had been the physical expression of a certain kind of success, kept up with the specific attention of people for whom the house was not just a house but a statement. The garden, the driveway, the brass knocker on the door that had been polished for 35 years into the specific sheen of things that have been maintained past the point of function into the realm of principle. He parked. He sat. He thought about what he needed from this conversation. He had thought about it carefully. He had thought about it in the way he thought about difficult professional situations, what outcome was available, what outcome was desirable, what the gap between those was, and what he needed to say to navigate it. He was not going to get back 23 years. He was not going to get back the hallway, or the name said quietly, or the parking lot, or Emma's letter that had never been sent. What he could get was the truth said out loud by the person who had made the decision. He could get his mother in a room, saying the thing she had done in her own words, with him present to hear it. He could not explain exactly why that mattered, but it mattered. He got out of the car. He knocked. His mother answered. Margaret Sullivan was 68, and she had the specific quality she had always had, the composed, organized quality of a woman who understood presentation as a form of control and had maintained that control through 6 decades of practiced effort. She looked at him with the expression she used when something unexpected required management. "Jack," she said, "this is a surprise." "Can I come in?" he said. She looked at his face. She read something in it. She stepped back. He came in. His father was in the living room, Robert Sullivan, 71, who had the bearing of a man who had spent his life being the authority, and who had, in the specific way of such men, never been required to account for that authority to anyone he considered a peer. He looked at Jack with the neutral expression of a man waiting to see which version of a situation he was in. Jack looked at his father. He looked at his mother. He sat down. "Tell me about Claire," he said. His mother's expression did not change. "I don't know what you..." "Her name is Claire Bennett," he said. "She's 23 years old. She has dark hair and her mother's eyes and my jaw and a DNA test that establishes paternity at 99.998%. He looked at his mother. "She knocked on my door 2 weeks ago. She's been sitting at my kitchen table." He paused. "Tell me about her." Silence. His mother's hands were folded in her lap. His father was looking at the window. "Jack," his father started. "I'm talking to Mom," Jack said. Robert stopped. Margaret looked at her son. He watched her work through the available responses. The same calculation he had watched people make when the facts were in the room, and the question was what to do with them. He watched her assess denial. Not viable, not with the DNA test and Patricia Oakes and Catherine's documentation, and everything else he had assembled. He watched her assess deflection. Not viable either. He watched her arrive at the only remaining option. "You were 19 years old," she said. The sentence arrived with the specific weight of something that had been prepared, not prepared in the last 2 weeks, but prepared over 23 years. The explanation that had been maintained and tended, and kept ready for the moment it would be needed. "You were a child," she said. "You had your whole life ahead of you. Emma Carter was," she paused. "She was not what I wanted for you. Her family, her background, the 2 of you were not ready. Neither of you was ready." "That wasn't your decision to make," Jack said. "You would have made the wrong one," she said. "At 19, you would have." "I would have raised my daughter," he said. "That's what I would have done." "You would have been trapped," she said. "Both of you. A teenage pregnancy, no money, no plan, you would have given up everything you built. The business, I want you to listen to what you're saying," Jack said. His voice remained even. He was very focused on keeping it even. "You are explaining to me that you arranged for my newborn daughter to be taken from a hospital and given to strangers because you thought I would make the wrong decision about my own life." Margaret was quiet. "You bribed a hospital administrator," he said. "You used Gerald Marsh, Dad's attorney, to arrange a private adoption. You told me my daughter died. You told Emma I didn't want her." He paused. "You forged a timeline on a death certificate." He looked at her. "This wasn't a judgment call. This was a conspiracy." His mother's expression had changed. The composed quality had not broken, but something underneath it had shifted. He could see it. The specific expression of a person whose explanation is not landing the way it had been intended. "We saved you," she said. The word saved in the room. He sat with it. He thought about what saving looked like from the outside, what it looked like to the person who received it without consent. He thought about Claire growing up believing she had been given away. He thought about Emma in a hospital room, 19 years old, being told the man she loved had signed away his rights. He thought about a parking lot, and a name said quietly, and 23 years of a room in the house that was always there. "You saved me," he said. Margaret looked at him. "Did you ever think," he said, "about what you did to her?" She was very still. "Not to me," he said. "To Claire. She grew up believing her biological parents gave her away. She grew up with that as the story of where she came from." He leaned forward slightly. "She is 23 years old and she went looking for us because she needed to understand why she had been abandoned. And what she found was, she found a father who spent 23 years mourning her death. She found a mother who spent 23 years believing she had been abandoned." He paused. "You didn't save me. You saved the family's reputation. Those are different things." His mother's hands tightened in her lap. "Did you ever think about her?" he said. "In 23 years, when you thought about what you did the thought ever arrive in a form that was about her? Not about me, not about the family. About a child you took from her parents and sent to strangers so that your social standing would be undamaged." His mother's composure was doing something. He watched it. He watched the specific thing that happened when a person who has spent 23 years maintaining a narrative is confronted with the narrative's cost in human terms. She looked at the table. She said nothing for a long time. "Then I thought about her." He waited. "I thought about her often," she said. Her voice had changed, something underneath the management, something quieter and more genuine and paradoxically more difficult to hear. "I told myself she was with a good family, that she was cared for, that she had advantages she wouldn't have had." She stopped. "I told myself a great many things." "Did any of them help?" he said. She looked up at him. Her eyes were wet. "No," she said. He looked at his mother. He looked at her for a long time, at the woman who had raised him, who had taught him things that were true and things that were not, who had loved him in the specific limited way of a person whose love was conditional on her version of his best interest. He looked at her and felt the complicated thing that she produced in him, the grief of a son, the fury of a father, the specific dissonance of loving someone and understanding completely what they had done. He looked at his father. Robert was still looking at the window. "Dad," he said. Robert turned. "Did you know?" Jack said. A silence. "Not at first," Robert said. His voice was the voice of a man who has made a choice a long time ago and has been living in it. "Your mother handled it. She told me after." He paused. "I should have." He stopped. "I didn't stop it. That's what I have to live with." Jack looked at his father. He thought about the specific cowardice of men who don't stop things. "I want you both to understand something," Jack said. "Claire is my daughter. She's going to be in my life. Emma is going to be in my life. Whatever relationship you have with any of us going forward is entirely dependent on how you handle what comes next." He paused. "My attorney is preparing documentation. There will be legal proceedings. Not because I want to punish you, I want you to hear that. I don't want to punish you. I want what was done to be on the record. I want it to be real and documented and acknowledged." He looked at his mother. "And at some point, not now, not soon, you are going to have to sit across from your granddaughter and tell her the truth. In your own words, what you did and why. She deserves that. You owe her that." Margaret was looking at the table. She was crying, not dramatically, not with the performance of it, just the quiet kind, the kind that comes when there is nothing left to manage. "Will she started, stopped. He waited. "Will she want to know us?" Margaret said. Very quietly. The question of a woman asking something she does not have the right to ask and knows it, and is asking anyway, because it is the most human thing she can do in this specific moment. Jack looked at his mother. He thought about Claire. He thought about the specific quality of her, the intelligence, the directness, the specific compassion she had shown in his kitchen on a Saturday afternoon, the way she had held the weight of what they were both carrying without asking either of them to carry less. He thought about Claire's right to make her own decisions about the people in her life. "That's her choice," he said, "not mine." He stood up. He picked up his jacket. He looked at his parents, at the two people who had made a decision 23 years ago in a hospital and had lived inside it ever since and who were now sitting in their living room with the full weight of it visible for the first time. "I love you," he said. He said it because it was true. "I don't know what that means right now," he said, "but it's true. And I need you to know that what you did, I don't have a way to make it okay. I don't have a way to find the frame where it becomes acceptable." He paused. "But I'm not done with you. I just need time to understand what that means." He walked to the door. He opened it. The November afternoon outside, the specific quality of late autumn, the world doing its quiet retreat. He walked to his car. He sat in it. He breathed. He thought about Claire at his kitchen table. He thought about Emma in the coffee shop in Columbus. He thought about Patricia Oakes in her doorway. He thought about a name said in a hallway, 23 years ago, by a 19-year-old who didn't know he was the only one saying it. He thought about a name said in a hospital room by a 19-year-old girl who believed she was saying it alone. He thought about what it meant that neither of them had been alone, that they had both been there, that across the distance of a hospital hallway and 23 years, they had both said the same name to the same child. He started the car. He drove toward Columbus, toward his daughter's kitchen table, toward what was still possible. Emma brought the albums on a Sunday in November. 3 of them, the same 3 she had shown Jack in isolation weeks earlier, but now there was a different quality to the sitting, a different configuration of people around the table. Jack on one side, Claire on the other, Emma at the end, and the albums between them like the physical evidence of a life that had existed in full while 2 people had not known to look for it. Claire had said, when Emma brought them in, "You don't have to look at these if it's hard." She had said it to Jack. He had looked at her. He had said, "I want to see everything." She had nodded. She had understood the specific thing he meant, not that he wanted to be hurt, but that he needed the full inventory of what had been. That looking away from it was its own form of dishonesty, that a father who had missed 23 years owed his daughter the willingness to understand those years completely. He opened the first album, First Birthday. He had seen this photograph before, in the sitting with Emma weeks ago, but seeing it now with Claire beside him was different. She was on his left, close enough that he could see the photograph and also see her face watching him see it. He looked at the baby in the photograph. He looked at the paper crown. He thought about September 14th, about the specific morning of it, the parking lot, the hallway, the name. He thought about what had been happening in another room while he walked. He turned the page. Second birthday, third. He watched Claire grow across the pages with the specific quality of attention he had brought to Patricia Oak's living room, the focused, complete attention of someone who understands that this is not casual. He looked at every photograph. He did not rush. He noticed things. He noticed that she had, at 5, the same expression he had in photographs from his own childhood at that age, the specific look of a child who has decided to take a photograph seriously and is applying full effort. He noticed that her handwriting on a school project visible in one photograph had the same particular formation of certain letters that his own handwriting had. He noticed that she laughed the way he laughed. He had not known this before. He had not had the reference. But Emma saw him notice it and said quietly, "She always has, since she was small." He turned pages. The first day of school. A Halloween costume at 8. She was dressed as an astronaut, and her expression was the one he had already come to recognize as specifically hers. The expression of someone who has chosen a thing and is committed to it entirely and is not interested in discussing alternatives. He almost smiled. He did not. He turned pages. A Christmas morning. She was 10, sitting at the foot of a tree in a house he had never been to, with the specific electric quality of Christmas morning that he recognized from his own childhood. Her adoptive parents were visible at the edges of the frame, a woman who looked kind, a man who looked like someone who made breakfast on Saturday mornings with the right amount of effort. He looked at them. He thought about what Claire had told him, that they had not known, that when the phone call came, they had been told what they were told and had believed it, and had raised her with genuine love and genuine presence, and had, when she began looking, supported her completely. He thought about what Grace looked like. He turned pages. A middle school science fair. She had won, the ribbon visible, the same expression he had seen in the photograph Emma had described, the focused satisfaction of someone who has worked hard and been confirmed. A high school graduation. She was 17, and she was beautiful, and she was standing with her adoptive parents on a June lawn with her diploma in her hand, and the specific look of someone who is looking at what comes next rather than what is behind them. He looked at that photograph for a long time. He thought about what he should have been doing on that June day. He thought about where he had been. He could reconstruct it roughly, the approximate time of his life, a Tuesday in a business that was growing, a specific client call he probably had or did not have. He had been somewhere ordinary. He had been living an ordinary day, and his daughter had been standing in a June lawn with a diploma and 2 people who loved her and an empty space beside them that was the shape of him. He closed the third album. He set his hands flat on the cover. He was aware of Claire watching him. He was aware of Emma watching both of them. The kitchen was very quiet. He breathed. He thought about all of it. He thought about 23 years distilled into 3 albums, and what it meant to sit with that, to hold the full weight of it without flinching, and without looking away because it was hard. He thought about the paper crown at the first birthday, He thought about the astronaut costume. He thought about June on a lawn and a diploma and an empty space. He looked up. Claire was looking at him. She had the evaluating expression, the one he had come to know, the one that was checking whether what she was seeing was real or performed. "Why didn't you ever look for me?" she said. The question arrived without accusation. She asked it the way she asked everything, directly, because she needed to know, and asking was the most efficient path to knowing. He looked at her. He thought about what he had said on his porch, in October in the first hour. "I didn't know you existed." He thought about whether he had said it clearly enough, whether she had received it fully, or whether it had been one piece of information in the flood of information that day, and had not fully landed. He thought about what the question meant, that it had not fully landed. He thought about what she had been carrying under the question, the version of events in which both parents had been given a choice and had made it, in which the story was abandonment rather than theft, in which she had spent 23 years, being the thing that two people had chosen not to keep. She had been carrying that. Underneath everything, underneath the research and the DNA test, and the door knocking and the folder full of evidence, she had been carrying the specific weight of a child who believed that her existence had been evaluated and found insufficient. He looked at her. "Claire," he said. She waited. "I didn't look for you," he said, "because I was told you died." She was still. "I was told you died in the hospital a few hours after you were born. I was told it was a cardiac defect. I was told." He stopped. He looked at the albums on the table. "I stood in a hospital hallway, and I said your name out loud to a nurse because I needed to say it at least once. And then I went home. And for 23 years, I had a room in my life that I never opened because I thought you were in it." He looked at her. She was very still. "I didn't look for you," he said, "because I didn't know you were alive to look for." Silence. "Your mother believed I had abandoned you," he said. "I believed you were dead. We were both living inside a story that someone else wrote for us." He paused. "Neither of us made the choice. The choice was made for us by people who believed they had the right to make it." Claire looked at the table. She looked at the albums. She looked at her hands. He watched her process it, the full reception of it, the specific adjustment required when a foundational belief about yourself is reclassified. She had spent 23 years with a story about where she came from, and that story had to have contained, he understood this without her saying it, some version of unwantedness, some version of not being enough to keep. He watched her reclassify it. He watched it move, slowly, incompletely, in the way that foundational things move from one category to another. "You said my name," she said, very quietly. "In the hallway," he said. "I didn't know that." "Neither did I," Emma said from the end of the table, "until 2 weeks ago." Claire looked at her mother. Emma looked at her daughter. "We both said it," Emma said. "We were in different rooms and we both said your name." She paused. "We didn't know about each other, but we were both there." Claire looked at the albums. She put her hand on the cover of the third one. She sat with it. He gave her the time. Outside, November was doing what November did, the specific gray of a month that has accepted winter's approach and is not arguing with it. The kitchen was warm. The table between them was covered in the evidence of 23 years. After a while, Claire looked up. "I want to know everything," she said. "All of it. Everything you remember about that time. Everything Mom remembers." She looked at Jack. "I want to know what you were like at 19. I want to know what your favorite things were. I want to know what you were planning." She paused. "I want 23 years of information to fill in." He looked at her. He thought about the specific word, fill in. He thought about what filling in meant. The patient, imperfect work of building something from the available material. The way his Camaro in the garage was being built from what existed rather than what had been originally there. "That's going to take some time," he said. "I know," she said. "I have time." He thought about a 19-year-old at a lake deciding on a name, because it sounded like beginning. He thought about what that name had grown into. "We have time," he said. Robert called in December. Jack had been waiting for this call and had not been waiting for it. He had understood that his father would eventually do something, and he had not been able to predict what form the something would take, because Robert Sullivan was a man whose interior life had always been, to Jack, significantly less readable than his mother's. He answered. "I need to say something," Robert said. Jack waited. "I knew what your mother was doing," Robert said. "Not at the beginning. She handled it. She always handled things. That was the arrangement between us, that she handled the domestic decisions and I deferred. I had always deferred." He paused. "By the time I understood the full scope of it, it was done. The girl was placed. The documents were filed. And your mother said it was the right thing, and I he stopped. I chose to believe her because believing her was easier than the alternative. Jack said nothing. I am telling you this because you deserve to know that I was not ignorant. I was complicit. Those are different things. Robert's voice was doing something that Jack had not heard from his father before, something stripped of the authority, the composure, the specific bearing of a man who had always been the largest person in any room. I was a coward. I want you to hear me say that. I hear you, Jack said. I would like to meet her, Robert said. If she is ever willing, if you think, he stopped. I understand that is entirely her decision. I understand I don't have the right to ask. Jack thought about Claire. He thought about her right to determine the people in her life. I'll tell her, he said. What you said, I'll tell her exactly what you said. He paused. What she decides is hers. I understand, Robert said. A silence. Jack, Robert said. He waited. I'm sorry, Robert said. Not in the way that, he stopped, started again. I know that's inadequate. I know there isn't a version of I'm sorry that is proportionate to what happened. I know that. A pause. But I am. Jack looked out his kitchen window. He looked at the garage, the Camaro visible through the glass. He thought about his father. He thought about the specific kind of man Robert Sullivan was, the kind who deferred because deference was comfortable, who had chosen the easier path at every fork where the paths diverged, who had loved his son in the specific limited way of a man who had not been required to love at cost. He thought about what his father's apology was worth. He thought about what he wanted to do with it. I know, he said. He ended the call. He sat in his kitchen. He thought about what Claire would decide about Robert. He thought about what he himself would decide, over time, about the people who had done this, about where they would exist in the life he was building, what roles were available to them, what the possible shapes of the future were. He did not have answers yet. He thought he might, eventually. He thought that was enough for now. Claire turned 24 in February. She had decided this was her decision, made with the specific clarity she brought to every decision that mattered, that she wanted to celebrate with both families present. Her adoptive parents, who had driven from Cincinnati. Emma, Jack. The apartment was hers. She had her own apartment, in the specific independent way of a 23-year-old who had been living on her own for 2 years and had arranged her space with the aesthetic of someone who knew exactly what she wanted around her. Books, plants, a print on the wall of a deep-sea creature that he recognized now as an anglerfish. Rendered in blues, he had come to associate with the specific branch of science she loved. He had arrived early. He had never done this before, arrived at his daughter's apartment, which was a sentence he was still learning to construct without the specific vertigo that came with it. He had knocked. She had let him in. She had been in the middle of arranging things, and had put him to work immediately, which was the most her thing he could imagine her doing, and which had made him feel, in the ordinary domestic way of someone being given a task that indicates they are trusted, something he did not have a name for but which was warm. The evening was what it was, imperfect, occasionally awkward, full of the specific humor that arises when people who have not been in a room together before try to navigate the room together, and find, gradually, that it is more navigable than expected. Claire's adoptive mother, Susan, pulled him aside at one point. She was a woman in her mid-50s with the specific quality of someone who had raised a remarkable child and knew it, and was proud of it in the unsentimental way of a person who had done the work and was secure in having done it. She's been a different person since she found you, Susan said. Not worse and not better, just more complete. She looked at him. I want you to know that I'm not holding anything about this situation about you. I just wanted you to know that. He looked at her. He thought about what she had given Claire, 23 years of it. The birthday cakes and the Halloween costumes and the astronaut suit and the June lawn with the diploma. Thank you, he said, for everything you gave her. Susan looked at him. She always knew we loved her, she said, but she always knew something was missing. She paused. She's not missing it anymore. He looked across the apartment. Claire was talking to Emma about something, gesturing, in the way she gestured when she was explaining something she found important, her hands moving with the emphasis of her words. Emma was listening with the expression of a woman who has been listening to this person for 23 years and never gets tired of it. He looked at them. He thought about the letter Emma had written at 19 and never sent. He thought about a name said in a hallway. He thought about what had been lost and what had been found, and the specific complicated accounting of a life that had contained both. He had brought a gift. He had been working on it for 3 weeks, not in the sense of shopping, but in the sense of building. He was a man who built things. He understood building in a way he did not always understand other forms of expression. He had built something for his daughter's birthday because building was the language he had for what he wanted to say. After dinner, after the cake, chocolate, the specific kind she had specified to him, with the detailed precision she applied to things she cared about, he brought it out. A photo album. Not the albums Emma had brought. Not the record of 23 years he had witnessed through someone else's photographs. This one he had made. He had gathered what he could photographs from his own life, the years that corresponded to hers. He had written captions at the bottom of each page in his own handwriting, what he had been doing, where he had been, the years of his life that had run parallel to hers in ignorance and that were now placed beside hers so that she could see both sides of the story. He had put them in order. He had written, on the first page, in the careful handwriting of a man who does not write often, but is writing something that matters. To my daughter, I am 23 years late, but I will never miss another birthday. He set it on the table in front of her. She looked at it. She looked at him. She opened it. She read the first page. The room had gone quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something is happening that everyone present understands is significant. Claire looked at the first page for a long time. Then she looked up. Her eyes were wet. Not breaking, she was not a person who broke easily, and this was not a breaking. This was the specific expression of someone receiving something they have needed for a long time, and finding that receiving it is both exactly what they expected and entirely different from what they expected. You have terrible handwriting, she said. He looked at her. The almost smile. The dimple. I know, he said. She looked back at the album. She turned the first page. She began to read. He sat across from his daughter in her apartment in February and watched her read the first pages of a life that had been running alongside hers without knowing it. And he thought about the room in the house he had never opened, the door that had been closed for 23 years, and he understood that the door was open now. Not all the way, not without the specific complicated grief of what had been on the other side of it, but open, light coming through, his daughter reading at the table, her mother beside her, a room full of people who had found each other, the door open, the light on. That was what was left. That was what was possible. It was, he had decided, sitting in that room, watching his daughter turn pages, more than enough. It was, improbably and against everything that should have been true, enough. It was everything.